Thank you, everyone. I am BK from the Pennsylvania Park Maintenance Institute. This is our second webinar. Our first webinar was looking at turf management. And so since we are in a bit of a new world, there's a lot of questions, things that we have. And a few weeks ago, the grass was starting to grow. And so one of the biggest concerns are, how do we keep our fields managed as we go? And people start realizing there's a lot more open space and even more concerns, things on furloughs. And so we needed to think about, how can we manage our open space, and what are some options that we can look at, either handling things with a few folks down, or just concerned about saving money and budgets. And so we have invited some experts that are experienced in establishing meadows, and we also have some help here from some folks on the ground in the field that are working and managing spaces, so they can give us some of their insights and their feedback on what they are doing and some current options. Just a little housekeeping for Zoom, either on the very bottom of your screen, or some of your setups may have it at the top. We ask that you can, if you will, keep yourselves muted, so that we won't get that wonderful feedback loop or any wonderful surprises that sometimes happen when people come into the room. Also, we really appreciate if you have any questions, or if there are any specific topics that you want to hit. Plus, down at the bottom, you'll see that chat box, and so that can be used there. Type your questions in there, and we'll try to touch upon everything that people have on their minds. And lastly, this is being recorded. If you wanted to get an immediate copy, or as soon as we have it processed, please put your name, your organization, and your email address in that chat box at any point in time, and I'll make sure I get all this back to you. I'll also put some links at the end here, so you can go and look at some of the other web recordings that we have, as well as some of the resources that we have for the Park Maintenance Institute. But before our discussion really kicks off, I would like our panel to introduce themselves and describe their connection with open space management and their experience in low mow and no mow operations. If we could start off with Kate.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along and having us kind of speak to you. Hopefully we can provide some information that's going to be helpful. So to give you a little background, I'm the Senior Environmental Scientist at Wildlands Conservancy. We were founded in 1973. We're a nonprofit land trust working in the Lehigh Valley and Lehigh River watershed area. So that's in the eastern portion of the state. The Lehigh is a direct tributary to the Delaware, for anyone who's not familiar. And we work on a variety of different conservation projects. So we protect high-value land from development, as well as own and manage nature preserves and conservation easements with landowners. We steward thousands of acres of wildlife habitat through various restoration and management practices. We provide nature-based education programs for a lot of schools and local community members of all ages. We also develop trail links and greenways in natural areas and along waterways. So I work in what's called our Ecological Restoration Department. So we focus on stream and habitat restoration work. And we work with public and private landowners to improve the health of their streams and the sustainability of their land through a number of different restoration methods. So we focus on riparian buffer planting, so that's vegetation along streams, and a lot of stream bank restoration work. Do a lot of wildlife habitat management. We work in dam removal and stream restoration. And we also work with a lot of local municipalities on a lot of natural resource restoration work, so in local parks and nature preserves, things like that. That includes a lot of meadow and grassland restoration work. And a lot of this work for us has focused on riparian buffers along streams. So a lot of these municipalities do own land along streams. So a lot of the time the meadow gets incorporated in as part of that recurring buffer restoration effort. A lot of these municipalities are facing issues with erosion and flooding and kind of other stormwater management issues. So we do a lot of work with them to address those issues, but we also work with them on meadow and grassland restoration work away from streams as well. So kind of do a little bit of everything.
All right, thank you. Gary, you want to jump in?
Sure. My name is Gary Gimbert. I work for Natural Lands. We're a land trust based out of Media, PA, in Delaware County. We own and manage about 43 preserves, totaling about 23,000 acres. We hold over 350 conservation easements on about the same amount of acreage. I'm a regional director for the Stewardship department. So I oversee all the land and the preserve staff that we have in Pennsylvania, and we go out further. Our preserve we have furthest west is in Carlisle, and then we're up in the Poconos, and then down almost near the Delaware state line. And I've been working with Natural Lands since pretty much right out of college, 1996, and been working my way up the ladder. I've started as a stewardship assistant, which is our entry level. I've been a preserve manager, and then now my current position. Worked on all kinds of projects from stream restoration, riparian buffers, dam removal, and we started meadow restoration, I guess it was back in 1999 is when we really got into it and bought our own no-till drill, and been learning ever since. That's pretty much it.
All right, thanks. Derek, you want to jump in?
Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Dureka. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director with Upper Dublin Township. Upper Dublin is a suburb of Philadelphia, a bedroom community of about 26,000 residents, about 9,500 households, 13 square miles. As director, I oversee approximately 600 acres of open space, and that's spread throughout 44 properties. And we have a typical, what you would expect in a municipal setting, variety of active and passive recreation areas, natural spaces. We have a community pool, 2 artificial turf fields, environmental education center, and a dog park, 11 miles of soft and hard surface trails. And then of that staff, our staff taking care of that, we have 9 full-time, 2 who are supervisors, and 4 part-time employees. One of those full-time employees is dedicated to our environmental education center. About 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, we really started on an effort to look at reducing our mowing. And I'll get into the details of it. But specifically, we were looking at reducing our mowing to create more time to do other things. So we've had some successes, some challenges along the way as well. But our goal is to kind of create the new normal for our neighbors, our park neighbors, as well as our residents, to see that you can have both kind of unmowed, beautiful areas that reduces the carbon imprint, but also frees you up for to have time to do other things. We've seen a financial savings as well as, again, a reallocation of staff hours. So I'll get into more detail about that as we're going through.
Great, thank you. And I just launched a poll I have out there just to kind of see where are we at right now. So just asking folks, are you currently implementing low mow, no mow, or in your open spaces? Give it a couple seconds there. The numbers are jumping.
Hey, BK, it's Brendan from Berks County Parks.
Oh, great. Brendan, you are in here. I didn't see your name. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So Brendan Lederer with Berks County Parks Department, Assistant Director. Been in open space management since 1994. Been with the county for 8 years and working with other jobs in municipalities and open space management stuff as well. And looking forward to discussing some of the items with low mow, no mow, and how that can assist some of our peers in this issue we have with the pandemic at this point, in being able to help reallocate manpower or even do some financial savings and stuff as well when we're stricken with some problems with finances and things like that as well. So I'll be able to offer some thoughts on that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for jumping in there. It looks like our responses here, we have about 57% of folks have some sort of low mow, no mow, 17% are thinking about it, and 26 said no, not at all. I'll send that out. Now, so I guess some of the questions, if you're thinking about establishing, is it as easy as just not mowing areas, or what are some of the real implications, if you will? Like, what are the steps that we would think about to get something like this started?
Well, I could start off if you want, BK.
Absolutely.
I think some of what there would be different interests and different reasonings for being able to do anything from low mow to meadows and different stream buffers, riparian buffers, and things like that as well. So that would need to be in consideration, whether it's financial, whether it is to increase the ecological benefits that go along with that, and whether you have the ability to actually just do a decrease in mowing, or you have the ability to start meadows and actually create them, like some of the other people we have here, and with their expertise on creating beautiful brand new meadows with all the wonderful benefits that come along with
This is Gary. I would just add to that. I think a big portion that when we worked with Derek over in Upper Dublin before, and some of the things is just kind of letting folks know what you're doing prior to doing it, and whether it's holding some public meetings, but some kind of outreach and education. And in some instances, staff may need a little education, a little different than what they may normally have been doing. So there's a lot of stuff on the to put ahead of actually implementing the project.
Okay.
So we did a critical analysis. So we really relied on data, and we do monthly reports, and we never really did anything with all that data. So we looked at the frequency, how our hours were really being spent. It turned out that over an entire year, 40% of our maintenance hours were being spent strictly mowing, and that was all with our full-time unionized staff and some part-time seasonal employees. So 40% of our time, and we knew, identifying that we had other problems. Natural areas were not functioning as intended. Regular inspections and repairs were not occurring. So when you're looking for, I think it's good to identify the problem that you're trying to solve by reducing mowing. So it could be beautification. It could be about hours. And we ended up ultimately seeing our goal. We set a goal then. We said, let's reduce mowing by 5%. And reducing mowing by prioritizing locations, where is active recreation occurring versus passive recreation occurring. Just strictly decreasing frequency of mowing. During the summer, we'll go to sites every other week or every third week if it's not really growing. We stopped mowing some areas completely. We also alternated weeks of when we weed eat it. You don't need the weed whack every single week as well. So all of those kind of built in. The other savings being fuel, service hours on equipment, emissions, they're all measurable things.
Yeah, and I'll just add into that. So, I agree with everything that's been said. Obviously, education is a huge component, both for the public and for staff sometimes as well. It's definitely a change from what's been kind of done up to that point. And then it's absolutely beneficial to have those meadows there, whether, it's for wildlife or for cost savings, things like that, water quality, anything like that you can look at. There's absolutely going to be benefits. And then as far as getting it established, it really kind of depends on the priority and the capacity of the landowner and any partners working in that project. So we've done projects that are a little more complicated, where we've come in and we've had a whole process for preparing the site, introducing meadow seed. So there's a lot of seed mixes, things like that, and then working on a maintenance plan moving forward. And then we've also worked on projects where you just kind of stop mowing So that can be a viable option, especially if there's not a lot of funding in place to kind of get something introduced. Those seed mixes can be expensive. You do have less control sometimes over what's going to be coming up, and you want to be vigilant for invasive species, which is the case for when you're seeding as well. But that's something that's certainly a viable option, and you can get a really attractive meadow over time by just stopping mowing, which might be the best option for certain areas, especially if funding is a concern.
So a few of you have mentioned education in a sense, and educating your staff. And what are some of those things? How do the techniques change? What kind of mindset will need adjusting if you are going to start introducing this kind of operation?
I think with some of the municipalities I've worked with their public works, they're very knowledgeable people, but they if they've been used to just mowing for active recreation, you're just kind of going over it, fertilizing it, those kind of things. But if you're letting it grow, invasive species, kind of, the normal ones for your area would be good to have everyone educated on, because a lot of times if you catch it early, it saves you a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of aggravation longer. So if someone's out mowing trails or around the edges of meadows and they see a patch a mile a minute, it's something they can stop the mower, jump off. If it's a small patch, hand pull it, throw it in a plastic bag, and then jump back on and go. And that, if you let it go a month, it could take over half the meadow, and then you're into spraying more herbicide, etc. So those type of things are good. And also just the neighbors and the folks using it, some interpretive signage. We've held public meetings we do stewardship plans for our preserves, along with public use plans, where we invite folks, neighbors of each preserve, to come in and kind of weigh in. We may not take all of their suggestions, but at least it gives everyone the chance to feel heard and that their opinion matters.
Yeah. I do believe that the communication to the rest of the public and neighbors is important, and that the maintenance staff that's out there that do obviously have to learn the identification of the beneficial plants and the invasives are also the first people that public sees and may ask questions to. So they do need to be able to communicate to the public the reasons behind why we're doing this and how beneficial these low mow or meadows are. And it's also important to have that signage. As an example, we put up educational signs that say why meadows are beneficial, why riparian buffers are beneficial, and also flyers, anything like that that you can show and get more education to those people. And for us here at the Berks County Parks, it's important that we use those as demonstration areas, that the public, when they do come to see this, this might be different to them. They may be looking to see grass all the way up to the water's edge, or not seeing grass more than a couple inches tall. And so that's new to them. Get them oriented to that, and that it is okay to have that. And also, is this something that they're able to do at their property as a homeowner and stuff as well? So it's important to have that communication all the way around, staff, public, everyone.
So BK, I would add something to this, and this has actually been, I don't know if it's the number of people in our open spaces right now, or if it's what we're doing. So we're currently in the process of converting a municipal golf course to a preserve/park, 105-acre property. It's been a golf course since 1931. We've had a huge number of people walking it. We've been mowing about a 30-foot pathway on the grass for people to walk it, and that's connected to where the cart path used to be. I fielded more questions and emails and phone calls about ticks this year than I ever have. And I don't know if it's because more people are out, or because of the aesthetic look of this site, where we've already started the naturalization process. It's mostly going to be cool season meadows at this point in time, because we don't have the funding to go through and do a warm season. We just want to get a feel for what's there. So while not directly related to limiting mowing or no mowing, the actual tick education and really encouraging people to take personal responsibility. Everybody just wants us to do a broadcast spray for ticks. And I try to explain that will also kill every beneficial insect plus affect aquatic life that's there as well. So that's really where we're putting a lot of our educational efforts right now, because we're just in the infancy stages of transitioning and succession happening, but really about how people can safely navigate this facility that's not a golf course, that's not a soccer field, and it's not typical active recreation. And that's been a lesson learned just within the last couple of months.
And in respect to the path, as an example, just showing that the area is maintained and that it's not unkempt, and that the people do see a border between the meadows and the wood line and these trails that go through there is important. And the information that if they have the proper distance with the mowing width of the trail, and just education on the issues with the ticks, it does go a long way. So showing that even though it's a wild area or an unkempt area, it's still beneficial to let them know and show the aesthetics that you still are doing some maintenance.
I also find, just real quick, the adding nest boxes is a big plus to give folks something to focus on. I mean, we've done some kestrel boxes that have been great. You know, we've had folks actually want to volunteer to monitor them for us. And so those kind of things, and we have a group of volunteers that monitors our bluebird boxes. So any way you can bring your neighbors or the community in to help you out and become invested in the property is worthwhile as well.
As a logistical kind of question, in a sense, is can I just start this process at any point in time? Or is this something where years and years of planning need to be taken and it only can happen at certain times of the year? Or what are some of those big considerations that we should think?
I mean, for us, I mean, it's more a, I would say you kind of, if you're going to do a total restoration where you're going to be planting native plants and you're kind of doing removing all the competition, at least for us, we work on an annual budget. So that's something in late winter when we start that process, we would like that to be talked about, figure out our costs and whether there's grants available, that kind of thing. If you're just going to stop mowing and let it come up, I mean, obviously the best time is in the spring because that's when things start growing. So you kind of, and it's always nice. I think Brendan hit on it, is, you know, I call it the curb appeal. You know, you might want to have a couple passes off of driveways and roads with your trails through it, just to give it that, you know, it's not just some derelict field, that it is being cared for and what's being done there has been thought through and purposeful.
Yeah, and I'll say just if you're going to be seeding or introducing it that way, instead of just stopping mowing, you have sort of your planting windows, you know, spring or fall. So you kind of need to be having a plan in place leading up to that, to be doing your site prep and getting everything ready to actually be seeding. So you want to take that into account when you're thinking about how you want to kill off the existing vegetation. You want to kind of have a plan in place in that way.
And I think with, and Gary and Kate can help me on this too, you have a couple different, you could just stop mowing and allow the grasses to grow. And you have the other extreme where they're talking about the removal of the vegetation and whatever means to be able to do some planting. And I do believe there might be even something where it's just supplemental planting too as well, where you don't have to do a full removal of the existing vegetation, but you can supplement too. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, I usually think of that as kind of smaller areas that you could come in with plugs, or, you know, do patches of wildflowers where you just kill off certain small patches and seed them that way. But I think depending on your budget, I mean, I usually ballpark plugs at about $1 a piece. So that can get expensive real quick depending on the size of the project. But that's definitely a way to do it.
I think the biggest thing is if you're going to just go no mow, you really, and Kate talked about this, you really got to keep an eye on the invasives. Like we're seeing, you can tell it was some fill material that was dumped on this golf course, and it's just a breeding ground for Canadian thistle. And so it's just about to go to flower now. So we're going to just chop it. We're not going to herbicide it all right now. We're just going to chop it down to buy us some time. But you need to have active eyes, and it's worthwhile having some, and I'm not trying to plug Gary or anything, but having someone like Natural Lands or somebody else, even the Penn State, outreach for extension office, in your county, have them come out and just do a once-over walkthrough with you so they can identify. So then you go, okay, weed eat that, herbicide that, and be careful of this. Because when you remove one invasive, it typically just opens up space for another invasive to come through. We had that where it was a spot was taken over by vines and stuff. We cleared that out, and then Mile a Minute took over the entire property in about 2 or 3 months. So having someone with expertise, I always tell my staff, I have a working knowledge of. I am not an expert in the field at all. I'm a generalist, not a specialist in this field. And having either a third-party contractor, even residents in your community, there's a lot of experts there that you don't even realize. Put the word out, do a walk with them, and you'd be surprised how many people would go, oh, keep careful of this. You have mogwort over there. This is starting to come up. And they can help you with that. So you don't always need to pay for a consultant.
Is it important to do things like soil tests and making it more like a garden where you put irrigation in and things? Is that a necessary process?
I mean, it depends what you're doing. I mean, when I first started doing meadow restoration, I would do soil tests before every project. I found in our area, most native plants tend to be stress tolerators. So I never received a soil test back that said add this or add that. So I've kind of gotten away from that. I don't get in. I mean, again, in our situation, it would be way too expensive to run irrigation through, a couple 100 acres of meadow. It goes back to what Kate said, picking your timing. If you're going to, I like to do, if I was doing a spring planting, I'd like to be doing it kind of mid-May, kind of not much further than the first week of June. And then if I was going to do a dormant seeding planting, you really don't, that one, you just wait till you get a good couple killing frosts, and then you do your seeding. And then I usually bump my seeding rate up a little bit just because I think you lose some to critters and just like mold and things like that. But really, I don't think you need to do irrigation, things like that.
Yeah, that's something we don't do anything like that. And like Gary said, the soil test, it's something you can do. We tend to see kind of a lot of similar soil situations in our area as well. And that's the benefit of using native species. So they're going to be adapted to the conditions here. They're going to be able to kind of tolerate the soil conditions here pretty well. A lot of them do well in areas with poor soil. So we don't even recommend adding any kind of fertilizer or compost or anything. A lot of the times that's actually just going to benefit the non-native weed species and help them shoot up rather than your natives. So yeah, generally we're not adding anything. We're not watering, irrigating, anything like that. You kind of are just seeding and letting it kind of start to regenerate on its own.
And the only thing I would say with that is if you're going to go meadow, go with plugs or seed. Don't go anything larger, because think about the larger the plant, the more water it needs. So keep that in mind as well. We will do, if it's a small, like we've done an acre at a time where we've done some conversion, we will have our water truck come through for the first couple of weeks if we can reach it. And we'll just kind of just to get a little bit of water on that seed if we put it down and it ends up not raining when they said it was going to rain, just for a little bit of germination. But a lot of it will stay dormant until, it'll get activated. The native stuff we've had a lot of great success with when we've converted garden areas as well. You don't have to do soil amendments. You don't have to do anything. You just pop them in and get a little water on them, and they'll take off. They'll take care of themselves.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think I'd worry about, other than irrigation or soil tests, is I have been involved with some projects where, for one reason or another, the site history had a lot of heavy equipment and compaction was an issue. So it's good if you could get like a subsoiler in there or something, rototill it up a little bit, just because I've had some, thankfully they weren't huge planting areas. It was only a couple acres, but it was just so compacted, nothing could get roots to penetrate.
We had a question come up in the chat. Could you all explain some of the differences between the cool season and the warm season grasses, maybe on a maintenance aspect of things?
I mean, for me, as far as maintenance, there really isn't much difference. You know, we're lucky enough that we have a prescribed burn crew in-house. So a lot of our warm season meadows are put on an every third year burn rotation. So a lot of those meadows, we don't bother mowing, where mostly we'll mow, in our cool season meadows, we'll mow a third to a half in any given year and then kind of switch it up. That way we're leaving whatever insect eggs or larvae in one half to repopulate the half we've mowed. But really there isn't, once you get them established, as far as maintenance, there really isn't much of a difference. You just have to remember, at least in our area in PA, the land wants to go back to trees. So you need some kind of disturbance, whether it be mowing or fire, to keep it as a meadow.
So mowing is a requirement no matter what. You can't just let it go completely.
At least what I mean, in our area here, if you let it go, it's gonna, you know, within 5-6 years, you're gonna start seeing mostly invasive stuff, but you will get woody stuff coming in. The calorie pear is big around here, and they'll shoot up quick. But yeah, meadows need disturbance in our area to continue.
Yeah, and I can add to that, even with some of the low mow areas that you're letting go, not even established meadows, you have the same concerns with the invasives and the woodies, because it does want to go back into succession and start to turn itself back into a forest. So that mowing, and a lot of the times for us here in Berks County, we do it on a once a year cycle. And now if we have areas, like I know there was mentioned, I think Derek had mentioned about the thistle, we'll go through and knock the heads off of that stuff coming up here fairly soon, just to help do some of that mechanical control, so we don't have to get into other chemical controls and stuff as well.
Yeah, mowing is absolutely a tool we incorporate as well in our projects. Generally, kind of after that initial establishment process, it's something, you know, everyone said once a year kind of situations. So we typically recommend that very late winter, very early spring for the growing season. That avoids a lot of the ground nesting windows, so that you're not kind of disturbing anything that might be using that meadow for habitat. And we also, in the first year, as those seedlings are getting established, a lot of those native perennials are focusing on root growth up front. So you're not going to see so much above ground kind of establishment there. So, but what you might see in a lot of cases is some faster growing weed species and invasive species that are going to be getting tall pretty fast, and they might potentially shade out some of the desirable natives that you want. So often in that first year, what we'll recommend is mowing kind of every time the meadow reaches about 12 inches in height, down to about 6 inches, so that you're kind of cutting off some of that really fast growing weedy vegetation and allowing some of the perennials to kind of keep growing slowly. So mowing kind of becomes a tool that you're using, but certainly less often than you would be if you're trying to maintain turf grass.
And BK, in reference to some low mow, there might be some of the viewers today that are going to try to implement some of just allowing their turf areas to grow for different reasons, whether it is for the ecology of it, or if it is financial. And on the other end, just like it is to allow it to grow, if you're going to try to recover that and turn that fairgrounds or those open spaces or the more underutilized areas of those parks back into turf when you have the manpower or when the time comes to utilize that for your events, it is going to be not just as easy to go in and cut it once, and that you'll have to do some maintenance on that and plan ahead to know how to be able to get that back where you need it. And that's doing several cuttings, and that's getting into some more turf type management where you would use the 1/3 rule as far as the cutting of the blades of the grasses as well. So that takes into some consideration that just don't expect to stop mowing and then when the time comes to go and cut it, because you will have a lot of other vegetation biomass you have to deal with when you do those cuttings and removals, and to be able to expect it back exactly the way it was when you left it go.
We actually went through that process. We had a grant. Gary and I worked on this project a little bit. He was my advocate. He was my shield with some neighbors. And we ended up converting we had an area that was turf grass. We converted it to meadow. We let it go for 3 years. Our staff was not as educated. I was not up on it as well. And I think there were two of the main reasons it failed. And I would like to do that one again. I want to mulligan on that one. But when we had to go back and restore it, we did several height mows. So we did a 10-inch mow, an 8-inch mow, a 6-inch mow, a 4-inch mow, got it back down to where you would, and then we had to aerate the area, and then we put new seed down as well. So it was a pretty intensive process. It looks good now. I mean, good for what it is, but it was an intensive process to restore it back to a cool season, kind of traditional, 4-inch, 3-inch high mow, grass setting.
Right. And this would be more for the passive areas that aren't as critical as turf if you may find on the active areas or even athletic fields. So it's a little bit more forgiving when doing this on those more passive areas and those areas that are allowed to grow at taller heights too.
Now, if we're thinking about doing this to cut back on maintenance costs and we're saving money and things, is there extra equipment? Are there some hidden costs involved in this process that we may not be thinking about?
I mean, for natural lands, pretty much we try and have a tractor with a 7-8 foot brush hog. We do have a couple larger ones, 15, the batwing brush hogs, but the pull behind rotary mowers, that tends to be standard. So that's always good to have. I mean, another thing you could look into, depending on the size and where your area is we have worked with local hay farmers, and we'll work out a deal where they can come in and do the cutting. We specify the time of year. Sometimes they may actually pay us for it. Other times it's a wash. They do the mowing for us. We didn't have to do it, and they get to bale it up and use it for mulch hay.
Yeah, and I'll say there are costs associated with establishing a meadow, especially if you're not going to just stop mowing. That's something we partner with these municipalities and kind of provide a project management component. So that typically includes getting grant funding in for a lot of these costs, so hard costs for seed and things like that. We have a local vendor that we rent equipment from, so seeders, things like that. And then a lot of the time, a municipality does make an ideal partner because they do typically have a lot of the equipment that you need. Again, a traditional mower often doesn't work depending on the height that it can mow at. Sometimes they are mowing too low. So if you're trying to prevent killing some of the perennial seedlings, you want to mow a little bit higher. But in general, they're kind of set up that they have a lot of the equipment. So it's just kind of in that establishment process when, for us, the grant funding really helps kind of get that component in place.
And I think it's when you talk about frequency, the frequency of mowing is going to go way down, but the time it takes to mow that area, you're not moving. You don't have a zero turn, and you're zipping back and forth. This is a slower pace. You also want to be careful because of the natural areas you're mowing in. You can't see everything that's ahead of you. So you want your staff to go at a slower pace. Still net, it's less hours. And we never say it's no maintenance, it's just a different type of maintenance. When you would not normally be doing an invasive control, either herbicide spray or a mechanical removal with a mower or whatever, that's not something you're traditionally doing with with cool season mowed grasses. So it's not you go from 60 hours to 0 hours. You probably go from 60 hours to like 15 hours. So thinking about it more of that way in terms of a reduction of staff time. I mean, our goal was to reduce our total mowing by 5% by identifying passive areas that we could just let go, doing meadows, or just stop mowing completely. We ended up decreasing by 10%, and at this point, we're almost at 2,000 hours a year that we save by the reduction in mowing. And we're doing regular inspections that we never did before. We're doing full park inspections twice a year now that we never were able to do. And staff has actually stopped complaining as much about, they always felt like we were band-aiding things. Now we're getting things done, and they're done right because we have the time to do that. So they see now, and they're getting more confidence in it because the things that they want to do are getting done. And most of our staff does not want to sit on a mower all day. Most municipal staff, they don't want to do that. So they're now getting new challenges, new projects because we have the time to do that.
And BK, to go back to the original question with the equipment, if the areas were the low mow that people are going to let go, you do need, and it's more available, is like a brush hog that was mentioned. One of the things that we do find are some of the regular mowing machines do have it's very easy to adjust the mowing height on them. If you have some more rigid mowing machines where it's sort of difficult or time intensive to adjust the mowing heights, that's going to be very tough to be able to get in to do some of the mowing. Kate is correct with the height of the mowing, but in reference to if you're going to be, when you're trying to bring that area back into a more turf-like area, it is nice having the machines that have the adjustability that you can go from one area to the other with ease of adjusting that. As far as saving some labor hours, I know here, and fuel hours here in Berks County, when we did about 1% of what our mowing area was, and we went to a low mow, we had, now this is just for the low mow areas, we had a reduction in 85% of labor costs just for that area. And for fuel consumption, it was reduced by 87%. For those areas when it's in the low mow area. Now, when we try to turn it back into the active turf areas, it came back and mimicked what you would do on a normal mowing cycle, because you are starting to lower those every mowing cycle. You're going from the 10 inches down to the 8, down to the 6, and so forth. So that when you're returning, it does mimic almost a regular mowing cycle. There's no savings in that aspect.
Some other equipment that's worth having in these is we found brush cutters, which is basically the weed whacker with the circular saw blade. That's good to have, like a backpack sprayer. That way, if you're looking out at your meadow and you're saying, well, it doesn't really need a full mow, but someone could go out and just, spend half a day knocking down some woody stuff or doing some spot treatments. But they're relatively inexpensive. You could probably get a brush cutter for a steel brush cutter for probably around $500-600 bucks, and the backpack sprayers aren't much either.
Yeah. One of the things I do agree with that is it's important, even with a meadow or no mows, to have an IPM program, the Integrated Pest Management Program, and in those, for each of those areas, we'll tell you what your thresholds are, and so that's just as easy as what Gary was saying. The guy jumps off the mower and grabs that mile a minute to pull it out, versus, okay, we have to send a guy out for a half a day doing some trimming with that brush cutter head, or maybe we got to send some guys out some more to do some chemical treatment. So really, no matter what level you go to or how you go about it, it is important to have that ahead of time, so you know how to proceed with any kind of pests you may have.
Where are some of the resources we could be digging into to find those grants, find that money, things that we can use to help educate our communities and even our administration?
Well, I do know in reference to Berks County, we've had a lot of help with DCNR, has some different grants available. Also, DEP has some grants with water, some water quality things and stuff as well. And there's also local different conservancies and groups in that aspect for some of the local things that can help with us. I know in Eastern Pennsylvania, we have the Schuylkill Highlands Partnership that does well, and I believe NLT does some administering of that. I believe.
Yep.
Is that Gary?
Yep. Yes.
So those are some opportunities to be able to help get some things done. And we've gotten some grants as far as in reference to educational materials, being able to put up the signs that are out there on the pamphlets. We've also gotten some other grants that help with plant material to be able to do that sort of thing as well. So it's a variety of things. It's how you, what the job or the project is, whether it's a stream or riparian buffer. You can even get some water quality things for some stormwater grants and stuff as well, if you can show that it's helping do some water quality things too. So it's how you package it and who you go to as far as the source, and that would help with meadows and everything, even educational grants to help. We have an environmental education program where we were able to get some grants to help with the education of some school students we bring there too.
Yeah, those are certainly the grant programs and things that we've done that we've been successful in getting funding. And I would say with any project like this or really kind of any natural resource restoration work, partnership is really key, is what we found. It's really a lot easier if you're kind of utilizing combined resources and a lot of different expertise. That's when you're going to have your most successful project. Especially if you're talking about, you're looking at a municipality that's never done meadow restoration before, there's no reason that you would just inherently know how to do that. So it's really important to kind of reach out to your local organizations. There's a lot of expertise. So, as I've mentioned, we work with a lot of municipalities in the area. We partner with them and we're able to provide that expertise and often help them with funding and providing maintenance long term. It's also really great to reach out to local watershed associations or local volunteer groups. We have a Master Watershed Steward Program, Master Gardener Program. Those are through Penn State Extension. And a lot of the times volunteers can be really helpful with invasive management, things like that, just keeping an eye on things moving forward. They can remain really engaged. And a lot of these groups are also really helpful with outreach to the community. Kind of everyone has different, methods through social media or websites or in-person communications, and the more groups you're engaging in this process, the more people you're able to reach throughout the community to kind of educate them about this process and why things are changing within this particular park setting.
We had a question pop up, and it kind of touches upon what Brendan said about having an IPM program. One of the benefits of establishing meadows is, of course, creating habitat. But sometimes in more suburban and urban areas, the habitat also invites pests and unwanted wildlife. So what are some things we can do to reduce that concern, or how do we mitigate that?
I think that's, for us, a lot of the time, we see that as part of that education component. There's certainly going to be more wildlife in these areas, but sometimes there's a little bit of a misconception about what that might mean for people being able to enjoy that space. So that's where it comes in with signage and education. We found people are generally pretty willing to accept a change if they understand why it's happening, and they understand that there's going to be a lot of beneficial wildlife species coming along to these areas. I think we've kind of covered before that there's concerns about ticks and things like that. So this has been said by many other people during this call, but basically kind of keeping a mowed area between walking paths in the meadow and things like that, kind of incorporating into the landscape in a successful way like that really helps mitigate a lot of those concerns and keeps the wildlife in the wild areas and the people kind of on the path. And so it's really just kind of doing it in a smart way and educating people about what they can expect and some of what might change.
For us, I mean, we usually the reason we're doing a project is to encourage the wildlife. So kind of on the flip side of that is there are certain areas where we may, let's say 8, 9 months of the year, we have a trail going through a certain meadow, like at our Stroud Preserve outside of Westchester. It's a really good breeding population of bobolinks and meadowlarks. So once about I guess it's around the 1st of April, we stop mowing that trail and we close it down. So we're keeping dog walkers and folks like that, out of that nesting area. So that's kind of a flip side. As wildlife starts to come in, you may need to make adjustments to the public use to accommodate that.
I think it's also important to make sure that buffer between the pathway and trail is significant enough where people feel comfortable. And roadways is the other part of it. You do want to provide some type of roadway buffer, mowed roadway buffer, just from a visual standpoint, because if an animal does dart out, you're giving, if you mow it another 6 feet, you're giving people the ability to react a little bit more, a little bit faster than they would if that mowed edge goes all the way up to the roadway. It also, again, gives that aesthetic. So I think, not only the actual concern about wildlife and ticks and mice and the fox is going to take my child, I think it is also about public safety, especially, a bike or someone jogging or someone driving, that they have that line of sight that you would have for any type of roadway.
Well, we're coming close to the end of our time here, so I'd just like to give each of you an opportunity to kind of sum up and maybe share any last little insights you may have. We'll start off with Gary.
If it's something you're interested in doing, and I'm probably speaking for everyone here, is if you want to touch base, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll help you out, or if I can't find the answer, I might know someone who can. But it's always a good idea to kind of comes back to the planning that Kate was talking about. If you can get a plan together, it helps you make your case to the folks that are going to approve your funding, and it helps you. One of the things I was thinking of was the funding that if you were to do a total meadow restoration, is to remember you may have 20, 30 acres, but you don't have to do it all at once if your funding's tight. Whatever you can afford, pick at it a little bit each year, get it going. And, it's a long-term process. We've done lots of projects where I've had X amount to initiate the project, but it's really been a 6-7 year project, and I add to it a little bit every year as I can find funding.
Kate?
Yeah, I'll echo what Gary said. Anyone, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or are looking to do this, and, just at any point in time, want a little more information. This is kind of just a general overview to help you, give you some ideas. But basically, I'd say, I think we've covered a lot of it, but there are a lot of considerations in this, in terms of why you're doing it and what to expect. And I would say again, if you're looking at, like Gary said, a 20 or 30 acre area, funding is something to consider, but also just what you're able to maintain, so your capacity. So, you don't want to bite off more than you can or want to chew moving forward. So it might even be helpful to start with a smaller area just to kind of see what it's going to be like to maintain in terms of managing the invasives and things like that. So you can kind of get used to it, and you can always do a bigger area later on. So just things like that, just thinking about the considerations moving forward for changes to maintenance.
Brendan?
Well, I want to thank you for everyone that's listening today, and I hope it was beneficial and you were able to take some things away from here to help you in your situation. I would also like to thank PRPS and thank BK for putting these things together and making these arrangements. And even though this is only the second one we have here, I hope this trend continues, and I do believe this is a great forum to be able to have peers come together and learn from the different resources that are throughout the state here. So I do want to thank you and also the Maintenance Institute as well. And good job. And I hope this keeps on going like gangbusters. And thank you for allowing me to be here.
Well, thank you. Derek.
I think we talked a lot about meadows when we're doing this, but something else to think about is afforestation. So the idea of taking a turf area, and that's more of a long-term project. I looked at these meadow projects as short-term in terms of getting them established, but we've been doing a lot of Eagle Scout projects associated where we're planting canopy, understory, and trees, and then shrubs in areas that we're continuing to mow around right now. But the idea being as they grow and get bigger, this is a 20-year project, that area can become no mow or low mow over the long term. And we're doing that in some of our neighborhood parks. So that's something else to keep in mind. And you can do it, I think people like seeing more trees. People like seeing more shrubs. And it's a slow, people have time to get used to that, where a meadow can be more shock value of, oh, it used to be that, now it's this. And people can get used to those trees and shrubs growing out and really naturally kind of taking over that space. And I would say that as municipalities, as universities, as large landowners in our community, it's really our duty to not only be mindful of the money that we're spending for maintenance and the carbon emissions that we're putting out when we're doing some of that maintenance, but also about we should be on the cutting edge of being innovative and creating the new normal for our communities. And the new normal, dandelions are okay. The new normal is not mowing every square inch. And we can really set the stage so we can be the hub of that, and our park neighbors can be the spoke of really, I think, a good environmental message that we want to send out, for our entire communities.
That's a great point. Thank you. It's a great way to close off. It is up to us to make these decisions and kind of create that new normal, because we're not getting all the answers. So sometimes you just make it up as you go along. Thank you, everyone, for taking part today. I put in the chat box there a link to where I will store this recording. Again, if you would like, I can send it to you directly. Just put your name and email in that chat box before you leave. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. And thank you again, our sponsor, Toro, who supports us and helps us exist. So please be safe out there, stay well, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody.